Hello everyone and welcome to our 14th episode of A Question of Property. We have been in lockdown for 7 weeks now. I'm your host Lucia France and I'm joined by our lovely panel of experts. John Howard, our property expert of more than 40 years experience and author of 3 different books on the topic, including Buying and Selling at Auction. Stefano Lucatello, Senior Partner at Cobalt Law International Property Lawyers, and Paul Mahoney, best-selling author, award-winning property speaker, and head of Nova Financial Group. So welcome to you all, guys. And we've got one question to start you all off today. How are we going to look back on 2020 in years to come? And let's go to Stefano for that question first.
Annus horribilis, as the Queen says. I suppose every coin has 2 faces, 2 sides. So some people will be seeing it as a great year because for everyone's downfall, for one person's downfall, sorry, there is an advantage for somebody else. And there will be people who will be making money on the money markets. There will be people making money on the property markets. Certainly one thing is certain, that whatever business you're in and whatever profession you're in, if you've got cash in your pocket, cash is king, and you can go out there and you can do whatever you need to do. For those people who've got the reserves and were careful in the past, I think now is their time, both here and abroad, and there's some good buys to be had and some good things to be had. Certainly for most people, it's not the best time in the world, but there will be those people like the money players and that play the markets and the stocks, that will be doing something somewhere in the world.
Okay, thank you, Stefano. Paul, what's your thoughts on this one?
I think it's kind of mixed everything up, hasn't it? You know, we've been forced to reassess. Pretty much everyone has been forced to reassess their business in some way. I know that we have. We would have never dreamt of working from home previously, and now we're realising it actually works quite well.
Yeah.
So we'll probably continue doing so in some way, shape, or form. I think a lot of people are realising that they don't need to have the big flashy office in the centre of the city, especially for their whole team. That's something that most people I speak with are starting to realise, that that are now working from home, obviously during the lockdown. And I think we're thinking something similar. We'll still have a presence there, but we're unlikely to have all of our team traveling into a big, expensive, flashy office every single day, because it's probably not needed. And that's been forced upon us. But I think in some ways it's a positive thing, because it's made us realise there are ways in which our business can be more productive or more efficient.
And Paul, just a quick question there on that note. What's been the reaction from your team in terms of working from home?
Well, they haven't a choice, have they?
Yeah, true.
So I think by now, from speaking with them, most people are used to it. They've got used to working from home, and that they, not necessarily that they like working from home all the time, but that they do view working from home sometimes as a positive thing.
Yeah.
So we're discussing all sorts of different options for our business when this is all over. And one of the key ones that we're talking about is maybe doing like a hot desking type situation, still having the central London office, because for a business like ours that's important. But not having 35 desks, having 10 or something.
Yeah.
And maybe doing a 5-day fortnight in the city and the balance at home, something along those lines, which we would have never dreamt of doing. Without this being forced upon us.
Obviously lots of hand sanitizer on the hot desks as well. And John, what are your thoughts there?
Well, the first thing, I've never had a big flashy office, sadly. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. I said I've never had a big flashy office, so I can't really comment on that. I've worked from home for 35 years.
You'll get there one day.
Sorry?
I said you'll get there one day.
Yeah, thanks. Although to be fair, I'm always been on the road, and I've hardly ever been at home. To be fair, and I've never really enjoyed. I think a lot of people enjoyed their homes a lot more during this lockdown, because they've got on and we've changed things and done the gardens and so on. So I think I think it's been good for most people. I know some people have struggled, and that's very sad mentally through it all. But I think for a lot of people, it has realigned their situation. Like Paul said and Stefano said, you know, people are reassessing their lives and they're reassessing what they want to do. And it's a huge game changer this year. I don't think financially this year's going to be too much of a problem for most people because they're on furlough. A lot of them have taken these small loans out from the banks and so on. Next year, however, is going to be very different. Next year is going to be seriously tough. When the Chancellor of the Exchequer says openly to the public that we're going to be in recession, a recession that we've never known before. When a politician says that to you, you know we're in for a very tough time. Very, very tough time. And yes, some people will fly during that time and others will suffer. But it's looking pretty grim for next year.
Okay.
Just for next year?
Yeah, next year.
Cheery thoughts.
Cheery John. It's unlike me. It's unlike me, I know, but it really is very, very serious.
I guess the thing is as well is that nobody really knows. There's just
we don't know. We're all guessing, including the Chancellor. But he's presumably got a bit more of a clue than the rest of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No one listens to politicians, though, do they?
Well, I think you listen to the next Chancellor of the Exchequer, Paul. Yeah.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Okay.
We're going to have a decade of austerity, and as we've only just finished a decade at least, and as we've just only finished, someone said, one commentator said the other week, Andrew Marr, I think, said that we'd only just finished paying America and Canada back for the assistance that they lent us in the Second World War.
Yeah.
Wow.
Amazing.
Well, if anyone was watching this and feeling a bit down and in the dumps, then
just shoot yourself now.
Look, I think to look at things slightly more optimistically, potentially we might have a tough year next year. I think a decade of austerity is a bit harsh, but you know, as John quite rightly said, there are still great opportunities. There's still a lot of money to be made, even in a bad economy. So if you're smart and you do things right, and you follow the trends and you take advantage of the opportunities, it's not like everyone's going to be broke next year. There'll be people making a fortune next year. Unfortunately, it will probably be your average worker that's going to struggle the most.
Yeah, I agree.
I think
everyone's going to be buying property and coming on your property courses, John and Paul.
Well, I think there are a lot of running around now trying to buy now, Stefano, and I think that's too early, personally.
Okay, right. Let's move on with our actual viewer questions then, shall we? So we'll go to John first for your first question here today. So this person says they've just purchased a property and have the opportunity to send it on to somebody else immediately. What would you consider to be the right amount of money percentage-wise to sell it on for rather than just develop it myself?
Well, first of all, congratulations, because they've got themselves in a great position. And when I'm in that position, I was always taught by my first backer, a guy called Robert Boyce, who I still see now and again. Robert always said to me, John, if we buy a property and we can sell it on immediately, we want to be making 50% of what we would have made if we kept it and developed it.
Right, okay.
So I would say in this market, I would lower that a little bit, because I think that, you can get the money back in and probably buy even better next time, the way the market's going. So I would say if you're making 30% to 35% plus, then take it. And be very careful that actually you've got your costs right, that you are going to make a lot more money if you keep it. So, for instance, if I buy land and get planning on it, I can almost make as much money out of selling it onto a builder than I can if I built it myself, because it costs me that much more to build a property than it does a builder themselves, getting their hands dirty, because I don't get my hands dirty. So, be smart about it. At the moment, I'm really advising people to be fleet of foot. If you're buying and selling, you want to be in and out quickly. If you're buying long term on a buy to let, that's different. Over 20, 25 years, I understand that. But so I would take 30% plus. Yeah.
Okay, so 30 to 30% if they're just to sell it sort of immediately.
Yep. So they've paid 100,000 for it. They can sell it for 100. You know, if they can sell it for 100, 130, sell it.
Yeah. Okay.
Just
great.
one point there. What about the stamp duty on flipping?
Never,
John?
ever, with the figures that I give in terms of profit, in terms of when you're talking about percentage of profit, yes, you have to build in the stamp duty, but never build in the tax. So, you know, don't put in personal. Some people say to me, oh, well, what about my personal tax? I've got to pay 40% on that. Well, you know, you can't organise you know what I mean, everything. At the end of the day, some people paying 25% might be in a company, might be 17% tax or whatever. So at the end of the day, I never consider the tax situation, but you must consider all your costs, and including stamp duty, of course.
I agree with that for all types of investments. Look at your net, so post expenses pre-tax return.
Yeah, pre-tax, always pre-tax. Yeah, good point. Paul.
Great, thank you very much there, John. Okay, Stefano, this is your first question for today. You mentioned in a previous episode, Stefano, that there can be a dispute between who owns the land and who owns the buildings in certain countries. Which country were you referring to specifically?
Spain.
Spain, okay. Any more thoughts on that?
I mean, it can apply in any country, but I've come across it only in Spain, where, as I think we said in the previous episode, right, that the land is owned by one person or entity, and usually a developer, and the house itself is owned by somebody else. Now, there are various reasons for this, because in Spain, especially, when a developer sets up the regime of selling plots to people, for taxation purposes, sometimes what they do is they have a marketing company and they have the developer, and it's the marketing company. You've got to be very careful in the contract that you enter into as a proposed purchaser of a plot of land, because you may be entering into a contract with the marketing company and not the actual owner of the land.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
That's where it comes about. The differentiation between the owner of the land and the owner of the property above that's where it comes about. But suffice it to say that when you instruct someone to do searches, that should come about. It should be visible. And in Spain, you've got two land registries, and one tells you one thing, one tells you something else. One is very similar to our land registry. The other one is administrative and tax. And you should do a search in both, because if you put them together, you get the full picture, and we'd always do that. So you must be careful. The problem you could face if you get it wrong, and there have been people, and we have acted for people to extricate them, is rather like where in the Northwest over the last few years, there's been this spate of Bovis Homes, Bellway Homes, and all the others who are selling homes, and they're selling you a leasehold, and then you've got the annual rental, rent on the land that goes up, whatever it's called, and there's been the ground rent. Thanks, John. Yeah, and Persimmons, I think, are the ones that did it. So it's very similar to that. So you're being held to ransom. So when you come to sell your home in Spain, you will be held to ransom, because the guy who owns the land says, well, I won't give you my permission on the document unless you give me a percentage of the sale value, a fixed fee, whatever it is. So at all costs, you must avoid that. Ground rents don't exist in Spain, France, Portugal, civil law jurisdictions. Leaseholds don't exist as such. They do exist for business purposes and short-term rents, one thing or another, but you don't have things like 125-year, 99-year, 999-year leases. You buy a freehold, and the anomaly is that when you buy at the ground floor, whether you buy on the 10th floor, you're buying freehold, because it's called a horizontal. There's a law called the law of horizontal division, which in effect creates a flying freehold, which to us in England and Wales and common law countries is an anathema. So when you buy a freehold, even though it's on the 10th floor. So that's what you've got to be careful of. And that's what could happen. You could be held to ransom when you sell the property by the person who owns the land, saying, yes, you own the property itself, but I own the land upon which it sits, and I'm not letting you have good title to sell on. And it could become a criminal matter as well.
Right. Okay. And in terms of like people who are wanting to sell on, if they've gone through the notaire, etc., and done everything the correct way, that I presume wouldn't be a problem then.
Well, the notaire, in Spain would be the notario.
Sorry,
The notario has a legal obligation, as I said in a previous program, to give good title, because he is an extension of the government. He's the representative of the government for tax purposes, collection and payment, and he is the representative of the government for giving good title. So he would, if he's a clever guy, he will, in his notarial document, deed, the escritura, he will give a caution. He will say, I have told the parties that one person owns the land and one person owns the property. They have both understood clearly what the situation is and the implications. I have exonerated myself from any future liability. And they put that in black and white. And if he doesn't, then my view is, if you find yourself in that position as the owner of a property you can't sell because the owner of the land below you is saying, I'm holding you to ransom, is I would pay the ransom and then I would sue the notaire or the notario because he's been negligent.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you very much, Stefano. Okay, let's go to Paul then for your first question for today. Could Paul please explain why he thinks that buying a number of buy-to-let properties would be better for me than investing in the stock market over the same period of time, for example, 20 to 25 years?
Okay. All right. So cash bought property and cash bought shares on a returns basis are relatively similar. And what I mean by that is you're going to get some form of yield and hopefully some form of capital growth. And when we look at that, the sort of average returns from that, you're probably looking at somewhere between 5 to 10% yearly returns on your cash invested. The major difference between cash and property and shares is shares are a lot more liquid, meaning you can get your money back within 3 days, assuming there's someone there to buy from you, which there usually would be if it's a publicly listed company. And property is much less liquid, meaning that it's more difficult to get your money out. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because property kind of saves you from yourself a little bit, in that people are far less likely to buy and sell property on a whim, whereas people do that with shares. So shares is a much more volatile market because people do buy and sell on a whim. If they see on the telly of a morning that China's having economic issues, they sell their shares. And that means that the price drops. Whereas property moves a lot more slowly, and therefore it's a more robust market. But the reason that we prefer property to other types of investments, the main reason is leverage. The fact that I can take a £50,000 deposit and buy a £200,000 property with a 75% mortgage, a relatively high loan to value, cheap interest rates, so 2 or 3% in the current market, depending on the property and your situation, over the long term, with we're looking 10, 20 plus years, with no ability for that lender to recall the mortgage, regardless of what happens to the value of your property. Meaning that even if the value of your property dips substantially, there's nothing the lender can do so long as you are servicing your mortgage.
Yeah.
Now that means it's very low risk, because we're investing in a tangible asset that's often made of bricks. It's not going to disappear overnight. If it's in a decent area, it's always going to have an underlying value. And if we're investing based upon the right fundamentals that drive demand, we can be pretty confident in pretty well always having a tenant as well. And therefore you're always going to receive rent. And that's another big difference between property and shares, is in a recession, if a company's struggling, they stop paying dividends. So there goes your yield.
Yeah.
Whereas in a recession, good properties still pay rent.
Mm.
So you're still receiving a rental income. You're able to service your mortgage. And if the cost of the debt is, let's say, 2%, and you're receiving a mortgage which more than covers that cost of debt, and you've got the potential for capital growth on the asset as well, we're generally aiming for returns from sort of 75% leverage properties of between 5 and 10% net yields on the cash invested. And if you're, so that's just the cash you, so the 50 grand example for, let's say, you're getting £2,500 to £5,000 of net cash flow in your pocket per annum, which is nice. But then if you're getting a relatively average 5% uplift in value on the asset, so let's say that same example, 200 grand asset, if that uplifts in value to 210,000, so that's 5%. And the UK average for the past 20 years is 5.5% per annum, which includes 2 recessions. So we had the dot-com bubble in 99, 2000. We had the credit crunch in 2008, bit of a dip in the market there, but the average is still 5.5. A 5% uplift in value on the asset is a 20% uplift in value on your cash.
Yeah, okay.
So you put those two figures together, you're at 25 to 30% per annum on the cash you invested without setting the world on fire with regards to the asset returns. So it's the leverage that does that, you know. So we can invest in an average property, but be getting 20% plus returns on the cash we've invested. Now, there's no other investment option that you can do that.
Yeah.
Whilst taking a relatively low level of risk. You know, some investment funds might give 20 or 30% return every now and again. Very, very few of them do it consistently.
Yeah.
And if the market dips substantially, you know, for example, if we do have a recession the end of this year or next year, and the market turns negative, they will report on relative returns. So they'll say the market fell by 10%, we only fell by 5%. That doesn't happen with property.
Yeah.
No.
Would you say
no.
that there are any, that there are any circumstances where you would recommend stocks rather than property?
Look, I think if you already have a large asset base, then it's worth having diversification.
Yeah.
You know, it's obviously a great luxury to already have a lot of money. And if that's the case, then it's worth diversifying across asset classes. But in my opinion, it's very difficult to compete against leveraged property when it comes to risk versus return and certainty of returns.
Okay.
Because as I say, we can buy, so long as you're buying properties that are going to rent pretty much all the time and are in areas with the right driving factors, we can have a relative amount of confidence in getting very strong double-digit returns on the cash we've invested without outperforming the market.
Right.
If you do outperform the market, you do even better. But you don't have to do well.
Can I say something?
Please.
It's a no-brainer. So property is, like Paul said, I mean, he put it extremely well. It's far safer, far more sensible to invest into. You don't need to have the expertise that you need in stocks and shares. I mean, I don't know about you, but I look at a stock. If I am ever looking at buying some shares, they automatically go down in price because I'm looking at them. I think I'm a disaster where shares are concerned. One thing I would say, and Paul may know the answer to this, he may not, but they say that property in a recession normally drops half the level of shares.
Yeah, well, I've got some figures on that.
Yeah.
The last financial crisis we had, 2008, excuse me, the FTSE All Share Index fell by 32% just in 2008.
Yeah.
And the property market fell by 8%.
There you go.
Right. So not
in 2009, it fell by another average 8%. So the total downturn of the last financial crisis, which was a credit crunch directly linked to property across the whole of the UK, was 16%, which, you know, isn't too bad when you consider.
Livable. Because in the meantime, of course, unlike, like you said, unlike shares where the dividends cut, you get nothing, you've still got the rental income. So, you know.
Exactly right. And that's the point. You know, if you've got a tenant and you're receiving your rent, aside from reading the media and them telling you the market's bad, you don't even notice the value of your property has fallen.
No, exactly. And if you're keeping it long term, you know, it swings around about, but in the end, you're going to be a lot higher.
Okay, that's great. That's a really great answer. Thank you very much, Paul. Okay, let's go to Stefano, back to Stefano for now. I am seriously considering purchasing a property in the south of Italy. Is there a better time of year to purchase a property there, or does it not matter? And how long will the purchase approximately take?
I would say to people, when you're buying property abroad, go out and see it in its best times and its worst times, spring, summer, autumn, winter. The buying process should take you 12 to 18 months. You should research the property market well, research the area, do your due diligence on the vendor, the developer, whoever it is you're buying it from, and get your ducks in a line. To do otherwise is fatal in my view. Number of people have bought abroad without having, almost like John's analogy in a previous program, of going to an auction and buying without having your funding in place, having looked at the legal pack and all the rest of it. So you need to do your proper due diligence. It's true to say that estate agents abroad sell their properties in the spring and the summer at the most, because they're counting on the sun to sell the property. I was always taught by another lawyer that I worked with that there's five S's that sell property in Spain, for example. That's sun, sea, sand, sex, and sangria. And it's still
like
the case that yeah, you won't forget it, John, will you?
No, not all of them.
He's writing it down.
When I do my talks, I always say that, and the number of people that have to pick themselves up off the floor. But if you think about it, when you are on holiday, people get bored after 10 days. And buying a property in that period of time when you're on holiday, when you are in holiday mode, and both of you have written books on property, and I allude to it in my book as well, know that when you are in holiday mode, it's not the right time to buy a property. You have to go out and not be in holiday mode. You need to be in business mode, in buying mode. Yep. Otherwise, the agent will cotton onto it. And why? And usually, being totally sexist and totally Italian here, they are usually blondes or brunettes with long legs, flashy short skirts, high heels, and they go for the fella because they know that next thing it can whip you up into an estate agent's office, and the next thing you know, the fella's whipped his credit card out and he has put a deposit down, only to cause grief with the wife or the girlfriend, and they're coming back. And then I get a call when they land at Humberside Airport and they say, can they sort me out? And so there's never a best time to buy an
example of what could happen, obviously.
An example, yes, there are many others, as there are many other airports.
Do men sell property in Italy as well, Stefano, or not?
Yeah, exactly.
Again?
Do men sell property in Italy as well, or not?
Absolutely. But the point I'm making is that you've got to be mentally driven, and you've got to have you've got to be in the right frame of mind to buy a property. Otherwise, the estate agent will sell you what he or she wants you to buy, as opposed to what you want to buy. And that's the point I always make at seminars. Go into 100 estate agents, and because they all use the multi-listing system, like the American listing system, you can go into any estate agent, they all have the same properties, whether they're a Century 21 or whether they're one of the other Italian agencies. So the point is that you should see it its best and its worst. They sell in spring and in summer. They do sell around the year, but especially in places where, like Sicily, which is nearly Africa, and the sun's there most of the year. And what was the other part of the question?
So the other part of the question was, how long
will it take?
Is there a better time of year to purchase a property there, or does it not matter? And you say, look,
it doesn't matter.
How long will it take?
I mean, I think I alluded to this. The process for buying a property abroad is the same wherever you go. If you're lucky and everything fits into place, you should, from the moment you like the property and you say, I want to instruct a lawyer, to the moment you complete, should take you no more than 12 weeks.
Right. Okay. Fantastic.
Stefano, did I hear you wrong, or did you say that it would take 12 to 18 months?
No. What I'm saying is, what I always say to clients when I see them at exhibitions or they ring me and they say, I want to buy, I say to people, you should take 12 to 18 months to do the due diligence. And because many of them say, I want to buy in Spain. Okay. And you say, well, where do you want to buy? Well, I don't know. Have you ever been to Spain? No. Well, you laugh, John, but the number of people that come to me at Place in the Sun exhibition at our stand and they say, well,
really?
And you know the tire kickers because you can tell them, and they say to you, I want to buy a property in Spain. Oh, well, fantastic, sir. Where would you like to buy? I don't know. Have you ever been to Spain? No. Well, go to Spain.
We get asked questions like that all the time as well, Stefano, so far as people saying they want to buy property investment in Portugal, and you say, why? And they say, well, surely Portugal is a good place to invest. You know, it's just that it's an assumption because they've been there once and they liked it, and therefore they assume it's a good investment.
But out of interest, just picking on that, sorry to interrupt you, but picking on, you picked a great country. Portugal, Paul, is the best country in Europe, in my view, to buy in for the sort of person that comes to you in the English market for a rental yield and an increase in capital, capital appreciation of property. Why? Because Portugal is so small that there are lesser number of properties available, that the property prices are always high, and throughout all the recessions that we've had, and they've had a few, Portugal has always come out top in maintaining its capital value and its rental yield of all the countries in Europe. And it's a great country to buy.
I just had a quick question, Stefano. Can you legally define the term tire kicker?
Yeah, a tire kicker is someone who comes to an exhibition and you're there and they have no intention of buying, but they usually nick a pen or they nick a sweet and they waste your time. They're a time waster, basically.
Right, okay. So I get you.
And it's usually because it's raining in London, it's usually raining, and they come to Olympia where we exhibit or the places in Birmingham, and they come with the prams and they come with the kids and they've got nothing else better to do to keep the kids entertained. So they say, well, let's go to the exhibition. They waste no time, they block the aisles, and they usually, as I say, the kids come onto the stand, they nick the sweets, they nick the everything else.
You can tell the people that aren't worth talking to at these trade shows because they pick up 3 pens.
Right, okay. It sounds like.
Hang on a minute. I'm always picking up 3 pens off people.
Well,
there you go. You said it yourself, not me, John.
Okay. Right, guys. Thank you very much for that very comprehensive answer there. Okay, on to John's next question.
Yes.
It's worded a bit unusually here. I've heard John bang on about his 3 golden rules.
Right.
Now,
He does bang on, doesn't he?
I have no comment there, but I don't seem to be able to find a deal that allows me to do that. Can John help, please?
Okay, so the 3 golden rules I work on are: if you're buying a property, you should be able to sell it immediately at a profit. The second thing you should be able to do with it is refurbish it if it needs refurbishing and sell it at a good profit. And the third thing you should be able to do is buy it, refurbish it, refinance it, rent it and refinance it, and move on to your next deal. And what I say is, if you can't do all 3 of those, ask yourself the question when you're looking at a property: can I do all 3 of those things? And if the answer is no, I can only do 1 of those, or maybe 2, then you have to question whether you should be doing it at all. Now, I've taken a bit of stick on this on Property Tribes and so on number, because people have come back to me and said, well, you know, I can't do that. Well, don't buy it. Go and find a deal you can do. You know, there's lots of people seem to be so quick to want to just buy the first thing they see nearly when they know how much they can pay and so on. And that's where it's so important to talk to you know, expert professionals and find out from them how they do it. So you're not looking in, first of all, you shouldn't be looking in the domestic marketplace. So with Rightmove and all these other portals, most of the property I buy is off market. It hasn't been through, or if it has been on the market, it's been on the market a long time and not sold, and they're ready now for a sensible bid on it. Because you're not looking, you're trying to find a needle in a haystack, I accept that, but you're not on the whole going to find it when everyone else knows about it. So you've got to be ingenious, and you've got to find ways of finding properties that are not on the market, or you can offer them first and no one else does, or you can get hold of the building society's list of all the repossessions, and they'll deal with you direct. There's lots and lots of ways of which you don't have to go down the same route that everyone else goes down. Okay. And of course, contacts are the most important thing. Someone else might have found a really good deal and be prepared to sell it on to you, and it's still a good deal when you buy it. You know, they take a profit, you take a profit out of it. So you've got to have a dealing mentality. It's no point just thinking, oh, well, I've got this pot of money, I'm just going to go and spend it. You might take 6 months to spend it. You might take a year to spend it. It's not about the amount of property deals you do. It's the fact that when you do them, they are successful.
Yeah. Okay.
John,
I can just kind of add to that slightly, because, obviously John has a very entrepreneurial kind of business hands-on approach to property. And I agree with him on that, if that is what someone is wanting to do. However, that's certainly not the only way to invest in property. Many of our clients, for example, are professionals. They've got a full-time job and they have a family and they don't have any time, and they don't want a second job. They don't want to be going to auctions or seeking out the best possible deal they can possibly get, because that takes time they don't have. But what they do want is, to better utilize their resources by investing in property. So, I suppose in our view, property isn't always about having to get the biggest possible discount and seeking out the best possible deal, as much as it is sometimes about actually getting exposure to it and, taking cash or taking equity in your home or your other properties to build a portfolio.
And I guess,
so I think it just depends on what suits you and your personal criteria.
Well,
maybe
sounds like I've been doing it wrong for 40 years.
No, I'm not saying you're doing it wrong at all, John, but this is what you do all day, every day. And you have the time and the knowledge and the experience to do it. Whereas if you're a full-time doctor, that person doesn't have the time, knowledge, or experience to do it.
No, I completely agree with you, Paul. And what I would, even those people shouldn't be going on Rightmove and or one of the other portals and just buying a property. They need to come, if they like that, and I understand that, they need to come to people like you who can organise a discount for them on a property and can guide them through that process. And the ones that go off piste, if you like, and do it themselves, I can't tell you how often it's a waste of their time. They really need to seek advice. And if they're not hands-on, I understand that, but they need to be going to people like you who can advise them accordingly.
Right.
Guys, I keep reading all these books about making money without this and without that, and people like you in their courses and the books refer to property sources.
Drive me nuts, they do.
So who are these property sources that find stuff off the market?
I think we need to be a little bit careful here so that we don't get sued, but go on.
Okay, so let me tell you about property sorcerers. So I call them deal finders, and I've got a number of deal finders who find me deals across the UK. Some earn good money a year, some don't. I've got one guy this year's going to earn 100,000 off me. Others have earned 200 over the years. Some have earned 10, 5, whatever. So we pay 2% finder's fee to anyone who can find us a good deal. And that's why we end up finding good deals. So there's been a new breed which have come out through these property education conferences and so on, and they're now called property sorcerers. And a property sorcerer basically sources deals for other people. Now, interestingly, I still source deals for other people. So if I get offered a property and it's not for me, but I know someone else who might buy it and give me 2%, of course I'm going to tell them about it. And I do that all the time. I've got 2 or 3 on the go at the moment, which is great. So it's nothing new. They're now called property sorcerers. The problem with them is there's so many of them. A lot of them have got very little knowledge. When you consider it, everyone at Savills, everyone at Knight Frank, everyone at Chesterton's, all these other big firms, ultimately, they're all property sorcerers, because they will be retained. They'll ring you up and say, John, I've been offered this. We've been offered this. The client's come to us, needs to sell this. Are you interested in buying it? So they're basically property sorcerers, but they're chartered surveyors and they're qualified and they know what they're talking about. The problem is on some of these property sorcerers, not all, some haven't got a clue what they're doing, not a clue. Off market deals, all this silly talk. I don't understand a property deal. Never mind be able to find you one. So
Yeah.
I'm very dubious about most of them.
And
Not all of them.
that's part of the
Not all of
problem
them, but
with
some.
these. Sorry to cut you off, John.
No,
That's part of the problem with these property courses that teach people how to be a property sourcer. You know, the amount of people we meet, especially at the property shows, that have a business card that say they're a property sourcer, talk to you about them being a property sourcer, but they don't own any property and they've got no money. So, you know, that's their entry into property. And I think, unfortunately, these people fall victim to you know, slick sales tactics of these guys who are selling courses. You know, they spend 5 or 10 grand to learn how to be a property sourcer, but then very quickly realize that you can't really make money in property without having money or experience.
And also, Paul, you need, you know, I'm not knocking them, because if you've got no money and you're starting out and you can get, you know, you can earn some money to deposit down on a property. I'm not knocking these people at all. I admire their enthusiasm and admire what they're trying to do. But they need to have, one, more knowledge, and two, far more contacts. You know, I get offered a deal now via LinkedIn or something, and it's been offered, you know, it's gone through 3 property sources till it gets to me. And the story's been muddled, and it's just a mess. And it's so frustrating, because there are some good ones, I'm sure. And I'm constantly trying to find those good ones all the time, because it's the lifeblood of my business.
Yeah. The unfortunate thing, I think, about the way part of the property industry has gone is, as I say, a lot of people, especially that are just starting out, have fallen victim to these property courses and that sort of thing. And relating it back to what Stefano mentioned about the books and things that say you can invest in property with no money down and all that stuff. If you're a beginner, that's absolute rubbish.
Guys,
Sorry, we're running out of time.
That's all right. We are running out of time now, I'm afraid. But thank you so much for that question. We'll have to come to Paul's one next time. If you do have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, or email us directly, ask@questionofproperty.co.uk. That's ask@questionofproperty.co.uk. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you to Stefano. Thank you to Paul. Thank you to John.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.